Good afternoon. I think, is the commissioner coming today also? I guess he is. So I'm going to go ahead and start. To our board members, to the few in the audience, welcome. Glad to have you. I'm sure we'll have a bigger audience tomorrow. I want to welcome everybody to the July Agency Operations Committee. Is there pictures on this committee? Yes. Okay. Yeah. Our new chair of this committee is Wallace Hall. I am not Wallace Hall. I'm Whit, Riter, and I'm a stand-in for Wallace today because he had other business engagements. First action on agenda item is approval of the minutes of the January 27th Agency Operations Committee meeting. They were provided to each of us prior to this meeting. Are there any questions or corrections? If not, could I have a motion to approve the minutes? Second by Joe. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed by the same sign. We're going to move to agenda item 3. I'd like to call on Dr. Alonzo to provide us with an overview of the topics for this meeting. One other thing I'd just like to, I was remiss in doing this. Eric, tomorrow, you think this is a small, tomorrow every chair will be filled, okay? So, but I want to welcome Eric, is it Roan? Roan. Yes, sir. I met Eric. He is our new student regent from A&M Corpus Christi. We are delighted to have him. We had a great student regent, Heather Morris. She just did a great job, and I've encouraged Eric to jump in there and to ask questions, but we want to welcome you to the Agency Ops Committee and all the other committees that you'll be attending, and tomorrow will be a full day, so I encourage you to just jump in there today, and we welcome you. Any comments you want to make at all?
Not right now, but thank you very much, sir. Thank you for the welcome.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Okay, Dr. Alonzo, agenda item 3.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to cover the quarterly financial report rather briefly, and then I'm going to call on my colleagues Dan Weaver and Dan Griffith to present the other 2 reports that are on the agenda, which would be the ARA and a short report on our loan programs. The financial report you received when the package went out a couple of weeks ago, and this is the financial report as of June 30th. I want to say that, I think you recall that this is a report that we have spent about a year getting in the right format, and that we have been providing to the board for the last year or so. We think that we have it in the format that presents the information that the board needs. I certainly use it as a management tool. It's a report that, if you recall, Brenda, when she was chair of AOC, had a lot of input as to helping us format this. It gives us the status of the operating funds, the trustee funds. It gives us expenditures to date, encumbrances, balances, any adjustments. At her request, we added a special page to track the ARA funds, and we'll have a report on that specifically here in a minute. And then, of course, a page that tracks the loan funds. It's both at summary level and at detailed information that on those items that I just mentioned. It is the FY10 for the current year, and we have incorporated the 5% reduction that we took in FY10 earlier this year that we were instructed to take. The funds and the accounts are managed by the respective assistant commissioners. They manage this to the appropriation level, at the strategy level. We keep very close in touch with them, and like I said, I, for one, feel that it's a good management report, and we feel that it also provides you with the information that you need for oversight of your duties. So unless there's a question, and I'll be glad to go to any section, but my intent was not to read the whole report to you. But I'll be pleased to answer any questions, or have staff available here to answer any specific questions.
Any questions from the committee? And we are going to have a report on ARA funds anyway.
We are.
There being no questions, move to the next item.
Thank you. So at this time, then, I will call on Dan Griffith, our Director of ARA Programs, to provide you a brief overview and update on our ARA funds. He'll be followed by Dan Weaver, who will provide you with a report on the loan funds. Dan?
Thank you, Dr. Alonzo, and good afternoon, Chairman Riter and committee members. I'm Dan Griffiths, Director of the ARA Government Services Fund Program here at the Coordinating Board. As requested by the Agency Operations Committee, I'd like to provide this standing report for past and future activities. The past quarter has been focused on the increase of reimbursement and documentation volume from our subrecipients. That's nearly tripled since the previous quarter. We've been closing out awards that have fully spent their stimulus funding. We've completed a competitive procurement for a local CPA firm to conduct on-site monitoring activities, and initiating an application process for the remaining $40 million of 2011 incentive funding to universities. The upcoming quarter will see a significant increase in spending, largely due to the Texas Education Agency textbook expenditures for the upcoming 2010 school year. We expect to hit the 50% milestone, or $362 million, for total program reimbursements in August, and estimate over $550 million in overall reimbursements will be processed by the end of September. Incentive 2011 awards to universities will be in place by the end of August, which will fully obligate 100% of our total federal award at $723 million. Our risk management and monitoring plan is on target for implementing desk reviews and on-site monitoring of our subrecipient activities. And we have 2 audits currently underway with the Coordinating Board's internal audit, and today we had a kickoff meeting for KPMG to perform an A133 single audit of the ARA program. July has been a heavy reporting period, with programmatic and financial reports being submitted to the federal government, the Legislative Budget Board, and the House Select Committee on Federal Economic Stabilization Funding. The status table at the bottom of the slide represents our program status as of the end of June, which includes over 100 subrecipient universities, colleges, and state agencies. We currently have 183 subawards in place, and when the Incentive 2011 funding phase is completed this summer, we estimate to have over 200 awards in the GSF program. In the third column, you will note that our federal funding from the U.S. Department of Education is static at $723 million, and our obligations in the next column totals $683 million to date. The number of reimbursements climb during each month. At the end of June, they stood at $173 million, or 24% of total funding. But with the TEA textbook reimbursements currently impacting our program, we expect to hit the 50% milestone in August, as I mentioned previously. Finally, jobs data is a critical metric in all of our stimulus programs, and in our July quarterly report to the Fed, we reported nearly 2,700 FTEs funded under the GSF program for this period. In closing, we continue to work towards meeting high levels of transparency and accountability required by federal, state, and agency leadership, while maintaining a strong degree of customer service to our subrecipients. I appreciate this opportunity to brief the committee on our program status. I would like to answer any questions that you might have.
Committee members?
Dan, I'm just curious if we've had any of the subrecipients struggle or push back on some of the things we've had to require of them.
Not really. Actually, they've been very cooperative as far as all the compliance requirements. We did send out a survey this past month on any of the subs that had not submitted any reimbursements or hadn't spent any money. And we got a positive response back from those universities and agencies that hadn't yet, that they were planning on submitting reimbursements and starting that burn, if you will, this summer. So they've been responsive both to obligating the money, spending the funds, and also meeting any compliance requirements that we've had to add on since the beginning of the program. And I will tell you that the federal government has imposed several changes on us as far as reporting, which some of those have impacted our subrecipients, so they've been very responsive.
Well, that's good news. And have we shared this update, Dan, with the governor's office?
Yes, we participate in a weekly work group meeting with the governor's office, and I provide a program status report to Arturo, Dr. Alonzo, on a weekly basis, and that is shared with the governor's office as well.
Okay, I appreciate that.
If I could just add, one of the things that when you ask about the institutions is when before Dan came on board, Mark Cefaro, if you recall, was working with me on this. We met with the CFOs, spoke to several of their groups, and when Dan came on board, he continued that dialogue going to the CFOs of the institutions. So that has helped tremendously, not only in establishing that relationship, but in in gaining their cooperation. I'm not getting emotional about CFOs. I'm choking on a cookie here. In establishing the cooperation that we have received from them. So that has paid off tremendously.
Dan, one quick question. I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit, and I can wait. But I noticed that when there was one of the audits that we had was on the selected ARA funds, and there's one comment in here that said, report concluded that as of 9/30/09, the coordinating board could improve its monitoring of subrecipients in their collection reporting system. I know I'm jumping ahead of myself, but can you kind of just give me an update as to where we are versus when we did that audit in September?
Oh, absolutely. And while I wasn't here for the actual OIG audit, this audit, when it was published in January, we actually had seen the drafts back in November and December timeframe. So that really set the tone for us in the early stages of our program development to identify the needs out there to meet federal requirements. The three recommendations from the OIG had to do with being able to develop a data collection system for our subrecipients. That we designed over the Christmas holidays and stood that up in about 3 weeks. So now we have a secure web-based portal for all of our subrecipients to report to. One of the recommendations was to have guidelines and procedures for them to report the data to us, and in sync with standing up that web-based portal, we developed step-by-step reporting guidelines for them. So it's been very helpful to implement both of those at the same time in January as we were preparing for the first round of reporting back to the Fed. The other recommendation was to monitor and verify subrecipients data that was inbound to us, which we were turning around and sending out to the Fed. And so we've developed processes since then and refined those processes to be able to collect, secure, and validate, most importantly, all the data that's coming in, whether it's financial, programmatic, or jobs data. And so we've got tested processes in place that we've been using to manage the program for the last 6 months.
Good.
So 100% completion on those issues.
Thank you. Other questions?
I was going to ask, I know at the beginning of this process we were quite nervous about being able to do this well and do this right. It sounds like everything is going so well because of your focused time and attention, of course, the whole team. Have other agencies across the states, how are they doing? And are we sharing any best practices? Just a curiosity.
Absolutely. I think the other day we were in a meeting with the governor's office, and we were talking about how the state of Texas, no, actually it was with the Government Accountability Office, the GAO. We completed a survey and had a face-to-face meeting with them last Friday, and it has to do with their follow-up every quarter on our reporting to the federal government. They've cited that Texas is one of the best practice states in the country. Now, once you drill down into the state and look at all the different types of funding, whether it's for education, transportation, and housing, they all have their own programmatic challenges. With respect to education, have had to remain very flexible and responsive to any changes coming to us from the Department of Education. We know that we've shared concerns and challenges with state agencies on similar issues, but then they've also had special direction from their own federal sponsoring agencies that we haven't had to deal with. So it's kind of a mixed bag, but I will say that during our work group meetings on Tuesday afternoons with the governor's office, that gives us a weekly opportunity to share those challenges and best practices. I will also say that as much as we've had success up till now as far as implementing a very challenging program, really the test is yet to come, and that has to do with the 2 audits that I mentioned. We welcome the opportunity to be able to have our processes and our systems looked at in detail from an outside party so that we can not only test those, but to be able to look for continuous improvement in those areas. So I think now starts the phase of audits that we knew was coming, and so it's here, and we're looking forward to it somewhat so that it'll test our practices in our program.
And if I could quickly add just a couple of other items that speak to that. In March, and I was going to report this at the April AOC, but of course it was canceled. But in March, Mark, Dan, and I traveled to Washington, and we met with both the programmatic staff at the department and with the OIG, the auditors. One of the things that we heard, and it was a very much a surprise to me, because no disrespect to the auditors in the audience here, but auditors usually don't give you too much praise. But when we walked them through everything that we had done, we heard, we wish that all the other states were doing what you're doing with your ARA fund. So that was an affirmation that we're on the right path.
Congratulations.
Like Dan says, the proof is in the pudding when we close it out and have the final audit, but we feel confident that it will be a good success story for Texas.
Good. Wonderful.
Any other questions for Dan at all? I can remember a year ago the wringing of hands over this. Okay, so job well done, and I really mean that sincerely. It's something really I know that in my past leadership role, Dan, since you came on, I was losing a little bit of sleep when we first were handed the responsibility, but you've really done a great job, and Mark did a great job in the time he was working here along with Arturo, so thanks so much for all you've done. So.
Well, thank you very much, and our success goes to our grants team and to the agency for all the support that it's provided. We couldn't have done it without them, so thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Dr. Alonzo?
So now I'd like to call on Dan Weaver to present a short report on an update on the loan program operations.
So I'm Dan number 1. That was Dan number 2. Actually, we had a competition to have the fewest slides, and Dan, I think, has already won because he just had 1 slide. I have 6. If you want to go to the next one. I think Chairman Heldenfels in April asked for a update on our collections, and specifically talking about our post-judgment collections or our litigation collections, and I'm going to get to that in the 6th slide, so if you'll bear with me. We have had, I do want to kind of run you through a couple of events that have happened this year to kind of give you a sense of where we are at from a loan program operations standpoint. Essentially, our cash position is strong, our loan demand is stable, and our collections on delinquent accounts have improved, and I'll go through each one of these 3 bullets in a brief manner. We did issue 2 series of bonds this year. We had a new money issue in February for $125 million. We also refunded bonds in June of about $56 million, in which we realized about $7.2 million of net present value savings on that refunding. We worked with our bond counsel, Tim Deitloff, and Lee Donner at First Southwest to really craft a wringing every dollar we could out of savings, and it was taking advantage of some of our debt payments in the future to load up on the short end of the yield curve so that we could take advantage of this marketplace that we're in on the short end of the curve. So we had a very successful refunding in June. We were very, very ecstatic about saving that much money, even though it's really isolated from the state's funded GR portion of our budgets. But $7.2 million nevertheless. I've already skipped the last page. Where am I at? So as a result of these two bond issues and our previous cash balances that we have, we're in a very good position as we enter into this next lending season. The auxiliary fund has about $136 million, and we have about $42 million in the top fund. I put a note on Be On Time at the bottom. Be On Time is now self-sustaining within general revenue and general revenue dedicated funds. At the beginning of the program, we used Hinton Hazelwood refunding savings to jumpstart the Be On Time program, and we've weaned ourselves away from that in its entirety. So it's solely functioning on GR and GR dedicated.
Dan?
Sir?
The net present value savings, which congratulate everybody that worked on that, that's $7.2 million. Is that, are we able to put that back into creating greater capacity for lending to students?
Over time, essentially that took what our interest payments would have been on those refunding series and then replaced them with our interest payments of our refunding series, and that net present value is the differential between those two interest rates. So it's not, we didn't get $7.2 million of cash in the bank. We got $7.2 million of what will be put forward
projected
for new loans.
Yeah.
Just real briefly, our loan demand is relatively stable. As many of you are aware, we had a major shift in the federal loan program the beginning of this month, where the federal program has gone to direct lending. Because Hinton Hazelwood is an alternative loan, we sit on kind of the outside of the federal loan programs. We really haven't seen any major impact or effect on going to direct lending, because our borrowers tend to be federal borrowers anyway. So this is just a different mechanism for them to get their federal money. So we haven't seen any major impacts in our loan demand. We've created a loan capacity next year of about $125 million. The origination process is at full bore. Our origination staff are working to maintain our origination so that we do that on a timely manner, and we really haven't seen any major hiccups in either the demand or in our processing. I guess one other note before we go on to the next slide, 100% of our loan volume going forward is fixed rate Cal loans. We don't make, we previously made HELP loans, which is Health Education Loan Program. We previously made variable Cal rate loans using some of our variable rate bond proceeds from previous years. We've expended all of those funds. So we're a one-trick pony now of low interest rate, 6% Cal loans, and we're gonna ride the horse as long as we possibly can.
Dan, quick question. Are we seeing, the other student loan originators, with the federal program, obviously the game has changed materially for those people. We haven't seen that drive of higher demand at all, in our shop as a result of that.
Well, I think I have one bullet on this slide, but I want to. The alternative loan volume typically had been a Sallie Mae that was issuing a federal loan, also piggybacked on to an alternative loan.
Okay.
Now Sallie Mae isn't originating federal loans anymore, but they're servicing federal loans, and their alternative loans. They still have an alternative loan portfolio, but it resides kind of outside of their business model, their old business model. They haven't gone away. The bullet point I have is that the alternative markets they're reassessing their business models currently, because they are what in a lot of regards was a captive student market. That has gone away a little bit, not in its entirety. So I think this year is going to be the reshuffling, and folks are going to be trying to find what works for them. And then next year, I think that the fallout of whatever happens will show up in FY12 for us, not for this current fiscal year.
In the form of increased demand at that time?
In the form of increased competition, perhaps, with the Wells Fargos and the Sallie Mae's and Citibanks getting more aggressive in the alternative market. Or alternatively, they may decide that the market isn't as lucrative as they need it to be, and therefore their business strategy may be to cut back on their alternative loan volume. I think those kinds of issues are going to get fleshed out this year. As far as the higher education authorities within the state that had bonding authority to make federal loans that essentially has gone by the wayside, that's bonding capacity that's available for the state. We certainly think that it's a viable option for the board to consider getting some of that bonding capacity for the loan for Hinton Hazelwood loan program going forward.
Okay.
I don't know, did I?
You did.
Okay. The top bullet, repayment stream is flat, and Patrick Krishock, he can kick me. I keep telling him that our repayments are going to start going up just any month now, and they've been flat for a couple years, so I don't think he believes me anymore. The good news is our delinquency rate is still relatively low. We haven't seen a lot of 30-day, 60-day delinquencies on our loan portfolio, which has been a good thing, so it kind of speaks to the stability of the Texas economy. We continue to monitor that on a weekly basis. We haven't seen any major upswings, downswings as a result of the economy, which is good. And then specific, I've finally gotten to the point of the presentation to talk about our collection efforts and our litigation and our post-judgment. As to remind you, we entered into an agreement with the Office of Attorney General in November of last year and transitioned 7 FTEs to the OAG's office to take a more focused approach on both our judgment collections and our litigation and their litigation practice. And we've been tracking all along the collection levels that we have on our litigation accounts and our judgment accounts. And Mary Lou, do you want to go ahead and switch to the last slide? This essentially captures fiscal year 08, fiscal year 09, and then our year-to-date fiscal year 10 collections efforts. And clearly there's a major jump in the February or the March-April time frame. The transition in November, we've gone to a different servicing of our judgment accounts where we have personal service now, whereas previously we did service by mail. The judges were starting to throw out our cases because they weren't attempting to deliver by mail as an acceptable means. So we're really finding that we've made an investment in doing personal service of judgment accounts, and I think it's clearly it's paying off in our increased collections. Now these numbers are accounts that have defaulted, so they're in some kind of a default status or they're in a judgment status. So this is a wider net, but it's a wide net looking at 3 different fiscal years, so it really gives you an indication of the success that we're having with this new approach with the OAG.
Do you project that it's going to stay at this sustained higher level? We're going to eat into that.
Yes, for a little while. Our judgment portfolio is still large. We're still at $100 million of principal and interest, plus or minus. Our originating criteria has been the same for the last couple of years in an automated credit decisioning that we do in our loan origination, and we set those standards with the expectation that our default rates would start to go down. So we're hopeful that these rates will start diminishing as more of our accounts don't go to default and therefore don't go into a judgment status. So I would expect that this to continue for a while, and then I would hope that it would start to deteriorate as more of our loans, as we keep more horses in the barn as opposed to them getting out of the barn. And that's all I had specifically. There are a couple of agenda items later specific to loan program issues, so I'll be most likely back up in some form or fashion if you have other questions.
Dan, I've got a question. I probably ought to know the answer to it, but I don't. Are there limitations on our bonding capability as you look forward out 5 years, 10 years out, or maybe even 2 or 3 years? And if so, what kind of limitations do you sense is out there, if any?
We have a number of limitations. One, we have a statutory limit on what the voters have authorized us to issue, and that limit is we have about $400 million of capacity left. So at our current rate of either $75 or $125 million a year, we would run out of our authority within a 3-year time frame, 3 to 4 years. That's one. Second, we're limited on our private activity cap within the private activity bond allocation to $75 million within our subceiling. And we can or if there's availability of allocation, we could issue another $50 million should there be capacity available. So that's another limitation. That's a calendar year limitation, $125 million. And then we have a $75 million fiscal year limitation. 125 fiscal year limitation, and that's a hard cap. We can't issue any more than $125 million a year.
And how many years? You said 3 years you start to run into some problems?
At a $400 million cap, if we are able to issue $125 million, we'd have 3 more years of bonding capacity within the state issue.
And what about the machinations, this gigantic giveaway program we've got in the federal government in Washington now? Does that have any direct effect on what we're trying to accomplish here through our bonding process? I don't know of any connection, but it's a question that always bothered me. This money is floating around all over the place. Somebody, somewhere along the way, got to be counted for.
We're state general obligation debt. We don't. Nothing that's going on at the federal government is having any impact, either positive.
Even though Freddie Mae and Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac or whatever they are still existing pretty much like they were before the calamity.
Outside of what's impacting our ability to either issue bonds or to get a good interest rate on our bonds that we issue. So the answer is no.
Okay.
Any other questions for Dan on this section of the meeting? Okay, we have one more report from Mr. Weaver. Is that correct?
No, not at this time. I think we're ready to move on to agenda item.
Okay. Item 4 is going to be a report on the audit of the agency's loan program, as well as our agency-wide financial statements. And Susan Warren, who we've seen numerous times before, partner at KPMG, is here to make a report, and I will say it's going to be a very welcome report, too. So.
It has praises in it, too.
I think this was going to be a good report until I made my remarks about auditors a while ago. So that may have gone out the window there.
Not at all. See, it's already pre-printed, so I can't change my mind.
Okay.
I thank you for the opportunity to be here. We are here to report on the 2009 financial statement audit, and I'll just walk through the presentation you have in front of you. The agenda. Standards do require me to remind you what manager's responsibilities are versus what you've hired KPMG to do. So I'll go through that very quickly. I think everybody's aware of that, but I am supposed to remind you as I report on the results. And of course, most importantly, we'll step through the different parts of the audit, which are your internal controls, which you equate to a management letter, changes in accounting policies, the estimates, and then any other matters that we're required to report to you. So as always, if you have questions, please ask, and we'll get those answered for you. But on slide 3, just a reminder what manager's responsibilities are. You have the responsibility for adopting your accounting principles and, of course, for establishing and maintaining the internal control to implement those accounting policies, preparing the financial statements and complying with all state, federal, and agency laws and regulations. Slide 4 reminds you of what you've hired KPMG to do as your external financial statement auditor. Is we basically take that information and look at it from a risk perspective to determine whether the information is materially correct for the results of the year. In doing that, we obviously apply our professional standards. We have communications formally with management as well as the AOC. And then the last bullet on the page, I'm supposed to remind you that the audit doesn't relieve you of your responsibilities, but it's one part of your process. I think we all know that. So slide 5, just taking you directly to the results. You have an unqualified clean opinion. Congratulations. Praises. that's what you want. Basically, the financial statement is materially correct. We did not have to make any significant adjustments or anything of that nature to get to the published document that was released with the opinion. Second great set of news is there's no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. We've had those in the last 2-3 years, so you have if you'll notice in your packet, there is no management letter. You were one report short this year, which is a good place to be in. So there's no management letter, no control issues to report to you. Again, congratulations for that. There was no uncorrected adjustments. Those are adjustments that don't get recorded in the financial statements. They're usually an issue where it's not technically correct, but we just decided it's not material to post, but we didn't even have any of those issues to discuss this year. And the last bullet is the audit adjustments that were made were very minor, and they actually are listed in one of the documents you have. I think there was 3 of them. There were reclasses just to conform with presentation, but nothing of a significant nature at all. So congratulations again for a clean audit for 2009. Slide 6, the accounting policies. They are all listed in the footnotes of the financial statements. The most important thing to take away from that is there was no changes in 2009 as compared to 2008. What that means is there was no new accounting standards or anything that required you to change them. And secondly, there was no internal decisions by management to change an estimate or to change a policy. So they're all consistent between 08 and 09. Slide 7, on the estimates and judgments, we are required to look at those. They are considered an area of risk. As noted on the slide, the one that you have that's most significant, of course, is your allowance on your loans, the doubtful accounts, which you've just heard presentations about. And what we do with that is we look at management's assumptions, management's methodology. We compare it from year to year to see if it's consistent. If it has changed, was it a change to better enhance the methodology? We compare it to industry standards to determine if it's reasonable. And, of course, we recalculate to redo the math to make sure we agree with the numbers, of course. But at the end of that, we had no issues with the allowance as recorded. The last slide. The thing about this slide is everything on here says none. So I had all these other things on here are things I'm required to tell you if they existed. The key point on this slide is none of them did exist, so there's nothing to report.
Susan, this is a wonderful report.
It is.
You know what our history has been, at least mine anyway, 5 years ago. I have a question. It's a recollection. Do we have one more option that we could exercise?
There is one more option here on the contract, yes.
Okay. What's the limit on that, the time limit?
I don't believe so.
Or is there a time limit on it?
No, it would be for the 10 audit year, which is about to end.
Okay. So that's still on the table?
That is still on the table.
Good. Good job.
Any other questions?
I just want to say thanks for such a great, brief and clean report.
That thanks goes to your management team, but you're welcome.
Well, it does. I appreciate Arturo's leadership and hard work, and we'll give credit to the Riter administration for this. But I also want to thank Joe, because it was under your watch as chair of the Agency Operations Committee that we really began the ramp up in our auditing process. So appreciate your focus on that.
Thanks much.
Yeah, I'd like to second that, Joe. I mean, you're the one that got the ball rolling in the right direction. We every time we prepare for an audit, we remember this year and your guidance on this issue. So we're going to keep up that tradition.
I'm not sure how much guidance was there, but there was a hard head at play.
Well, we
it worked. Whatever it was, it worked.
Oh yeah. Okay. Good.
It was a great job on part of everybody. Also, Bill Franz, does this committee have to make any motion at all to submit this to the board or anything? Because there's nothing in here. So in terms of the audit, because we'll vote on the audit tomorrow to accept the audit full tomorrow.
This committee does not have to do that.
Okay.
If you want to make a motion to do that, you're welcome.
No, I just want to make sure of that. Other questions or comments?
I just, along the lines of beginning with the Hinton look into the audit policies, I wanted to ask, I mean, obviously this has been an evolutionary process for this agency, and to get to the pinnacle of success, which this is, from your point of view, have the changes that have gotten it to this point, are they systemic, and do they reside complete and in place?
Yes, the changes the agency made is additional hires, reorganizations, changing businesses' processes, enhancing controls, adding different checks and balances, segregation duties, things like that. Those are all a normal part of their process now.
Okay, and they're embedded in our agency, and
They
they're
are.
there for the, okay, great. That's all my question was. And congratulations to staff again.
Thank you. Arturo, Bill, I want to go back. If you look at our formal agenda, Fred was just pointing this out, you know, it reads, consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendations to the committee regarding the report on the audit for year ending August 31st. You know, I think it would be appropriate for this, and I'm the temporary chair here today, so I need to be careful, but I think it would be appropriate for the Agency Ops Committee, which is charged with the whole issue of, you know, financial review and audit every year, to make a recommendation to the board to approve the audit as presented.
It is
Even though I don't think they would ever not on a clean audit with, you know, no management letter. I can't imagine, but.
certainly within the purview of the committee. Absolutely.
Okay. Could I have a motion? Mr. Hinton. That motion being to approve the financial audit for August 31st.
That is correct.
Okay, second. Durga. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed by the same sign. Thank you very much.
Rebecca Rosie and I'd like to thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. The next agenda item is consideration of adopting a resolution relating to the issuance of State of Texas college student loan bonds in one or more series and delegating to the Commissioner authority for the filing of one or more applications to obtain a portion of the state's allocation for private activity bonds. And I know Tim Datloff with Vincent Elkins is here, and also Patrick Krishock, and then also Dan Weaver, number 2, is back to present agenda item 5A.
He was one.
It's his second appearance again.
So welcome back.
Thank you. Well, we come before this board once a year to do this type of action. You finance your loan programs with the issuance of tax-exempt bonds. And in order for those bonds to be tax-exempt, you have to jump through the hurdles of the state's process for obtaining private activity bond allocation. Because the proceeds of your bonds benefit private parties, which are students, they're regarded as private activity bonds, and the federal government tells each state how much they can issue, and the state, through legislation, has created the Bond Review Board and a whole process on how issuers go about obtaining that allocation. So this resolution authorizes the Commissioner and his staff to take all the actions necessary to submit one or more applications to the Texas Bond Review Board to obtain up to $125 million in private activity bond allocation to be used over the next state fiscal year. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
This relates directly, Joe, to what you'd earlier asked about. So, any questions? If not, could I have a motion to approve the resolution relating to the issuance of the State of Texas college student loan bonds in one or more series and delegating to the Commissioner authority for the filing of one or more applications to obtain a portion of the state's allocation for private activity bonds? Could I have that motion? Durga? Could I have a second?
Second.
Joe, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed by the same sign. Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Agenda item 5B is consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee regarding the Coordinating Board's operating budget for fiscal year 2011. And I think we each should have a separate package that was sent to us earlier. Dr. Alonzo.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You also have a revised version on at your places. It has today's date on there, and it's that blue, right? And that it's a slightly revised of what we sent you back at the beginning of July. I'm going to point out what the changes are, and I'm also going to highlight what the FY11 operating budget is. This is the second year of the biennium. Of the funds that were appropriated to the coordinating board by the 81st legislature. If you will recall, excuse me, in 2010, in February of this year, the budget leadership asked us to reduce our budgets for the biennium by 5%. This budget reflects those reductions. What the leadership gave us the flexibility was to take those 5% cuts in either 10 or 11. We took some in 10, some or in FY11, and so those that are taken in FY11 are reflected in the document that's before you. The two main components of the budget are the operational funds, or the operations budget, which is those funds that are used to administer the agency, and the trustee funds, which are, for lack of a better term, pass-through that we administer on behalf of the institutions and the students and other entities. For FY11, the budget that you have before you, which is $945,253,494, consists of right under 5%, 4.9% to be exact, of operating budget and 95.1% of trustee funds. One of the things that I would like to point out, besides the changes that I will get to in a minute, is that a significant addition to the FY11 budget is the inclusion of almost $12 million of College Access Challenge Grant, which are federal funds that come to us to the P16 division, for which the governor has designated us as the administrative agency to administer those funds. We also have a new feature in the budget. If you went through it, you might have noticed that we formatted it to include the estimated carryovers for the different strategies. We think that gives us a better visibility. So the changes that we've made since we sent this out to you, and Fred had called this to our attention, is on page 3, I believe it is, page 3, where the strategy 1.14, the Armed Services Scholarship, we had failed. It was just a mistake on our part. We had failed to put the estimated carry forward there because this is a program that will be all used in FY11. So we took the original appropriation minus the estimated carry forward, and then the amount that was transferred to the operating budget, and that amount is what is available for FY11. So that was one change that we made after Fred had reviewed it. The other change was that he had asked us on page 1 of the budget to explain Goal B, where we compare FY10 to FY11. Goal B, financial assistance programs, which is the first one under the trustee funds, indicates a $68 million increase from FY10 to FY11. And so those are due, and we put the note there on G, mainly to the carryover funds in the financial aid strategy. We had an increase in the higher ed performance incentive and the top 10% scholarships. And then, of course, we netted out any reductions that we had to make through the 5% reduction. But other than that, this budget confirms with the appropriation bill, the bill pattern, minus the or net of the reductions and the adjustments. We'd be glad to answer, and staff is here to answer any detailed questions that you may have, or to provide any information you need.
Arturo, do we push most of the 5% cut into 2011 due to the point back to when we got notification to make it? I mean, most of that reduction hit in 2011.
Do we have the breakdown or an estimate on that?
Yes, we do have a spreadsheet that does clearly
Do you recall
define.
if it was mostly in 2011?
It was mostly in 2007.
I thought it was, because I thought it was so late in the year we couldn't get much in 2010, if I remember right.
Yes, it is.
There were some that were made in 10, but most of them will be taking place in 2011.
There was like $8 million in 2010, and most of the other ones are in 2011.
Okay.
$8 million out of $73 million. Right. So most of it are reflected in this document.
Okay. Other questions on the 2011 budget? If there are no other questions, could I have a motion to approve the budget as presented for fiscal year 2011? Arturo, motion.
Second.
Second by Mr. Hinton. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed by the same sign. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Agenda item 5C is consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee for the upcoming legislative appropriations request for the biennium 2012-2013. And Dr. Alonzo, Ms. Battles, and Dr. Gardner will be presenting this item.
Mr. Weaver?
Mr. Weaver, I'm sorry, Dan, you know.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the moment that I have lived for the last month, and that I have lived for nothing else but for the last month on the LAR. Let me just say that it has been quite a process. Normally, it's labor intensive, but it has been quite difficult because of what we've been asked to do. So I'm going to lay out what the document is. You have a revised document before you. Again, this is basically the same document that you received at the early part of July, but we've made some changes. In fact, we've made some changes as late as last evening and maybe even this morning as we went through it and incorporated all the feedback. We've been working on this for quite a bit, as I said. And I will walk you through those changes that you have that are before you that are different from what you had received. They are highlighted in yellow, and we will go over those in detail in a minute. But let me just say that one of the things that we have done when we first produced this document is Linda Battles, myself, and Dr. Gardner have been meeting with legislative staff at the Capitol. We shared with them what we had come up with, what the Commissioner had submitted to the board. We told them that it was a draft and that it was subject to change and that there would probably be changes, but we wanted to keep the legislative staff in the loop early on, and they appreciated that. And they were most appreciative of the fact that we were being proactive and sharing this information, knowing that it was still a draft. We've also kept the chair and the vice chair of the board informed every step of the way. As we got questions, as we got changes or requests for changes, we would call Fred and Elaine, and we would discuss this with them and kept them apprised as we went along. The spreadsheet that you have before you, and I want to just kind of walk through the format because it may not be as obvious as it is to those of us that have been working with it day and night for the last month or so. You recall that, well, you already know because I just mentioned it in the presentation of the budget, that the governor and the lieutenant governor and speaker asked all state agencies to reduce the budget, the FY 10-11, the current biennium, by 5%. We did that, and that 5%, or that 95% of the current biennial appropriation became the new baseline for 12-13 going forward. So that is reflected in the purple column of your spreadsheet in total, because they are managing to the total amount of GR dedicated. And so we're starting off with our request for 12 and 13 at 95% of current biennium appropriations. In addition to that, the instructions came out from the LBB and the budget leadership for state agencies and institutions of higher education to identify an additional 10% into 5% increments in case those are needed to balance the new budget, the new appropriation of 12 and 13. Those are not cut from the base at this time, but they are identified, and they ask us to identify those in priority order, in reverse priority order of how we would take them if they have to take them. In other words, the ones that are ranked number one would be the first ones to go, with the ones towards the bottom of the page would be the last ones to go if they have to go in that order. So that's what we came up with. The blue column represents the first 5% iteration of the cuts. The yellow column represents the second 5%, and then the last columns represent the percentage in each one of those cuts, with the last column representing the total cut if they have to go to the full 10% by strategy. And so that was the instructions that came from the leadership. When we received the instructions, the commissioner further tasked us, and I had shared this with I believe it was the Strategic Planning Committee at the last meeting, but I think it bears repeating. The commissioner further charges and charged staff to approach this exercise with 3 or 4 things in mind. Number one, he asked us to not come in with across-the-board cuts. While that would have been the easy thing, and we would have been through in probably a couple of days, that was clearly not the right thing to do. That would not be the right thing to approach this. Second of all, he asked us to look at those programs that contribute towards closing the gaps, and to the extent possible, try to protect those that most directly have an impact on closing the gaps. Thirdly, he asked us to look at those programs that will contribute and that will have an impact on our accelerated plan for closing the gaps. And fourthly, he asked us to preserve, to the extent possible, those financial aid programs that serve needy students, and that, to the extent possible, preserve those funds that really go to the neediest of the neediest, without which the funds, they would not be able to go to school. And so with those 4 guiding principles in mind, we went to the divisions. Assistant commissioners gave us their recommendations. They submitted those to the 3 of us, Linda, David, and myself. We worked with them, sent them back, asked questions, made adjustments. Then we finally came to the commissioner with our recommendation from the 3 of us, and he did the same thing, asked us to go back, make some changes, and it finally went to you. And so in the meantime, as we met with the legislative staff and members, there's been some feedback, and so those are where the changes are coming in for the version that you have before you. I'd like to point out some of the major changes, and of course some of the ones that stand out clearly. If you would look at the right-hand column of that spreadsheet, hope that it becomes obvious to you that if nothing else, we follow the commissioner's instructions for no across-the-board cuts, because the cuts range from total elimination in the case of 3 programs to, if you would go to the second page, to a list of those strategies where there were no cuts recommended at all, and everything in between. So we certainly did not come up with any across the board. I'd like to touch on a couple of them because those are the ones that, if they are adopted at the full, as presented, would fully eliminate the programs. The first one is the one that's ranked number 1 in the blue column, and that is the OAG Lawyer Loan Repayment Program. This is a program that has been around, designed to encourage lawyers to go to work at the OAG's office. As we looked at this, we figured that this does not contribute to closing the gaps. It is a good program, but it does very little to closing the gaps. Second of all, we just learned about a month ago that we have been designated as the administrative agency to administer a federal program that is similar, not quite the same, but similar to this loan repayment program. It is a federal program under the John R. Justice program that will provide loan repayment to lawyers that enter into that go as public defenders or prosecutors. And while it is not the same goal, it targets at least the same audience. And so that's going to be about $700,000, and we are in the process of submitting our application for that. The second program that you see there that, if accepted, would be totally eliminated is the African American Museum. That's ranked number 2. This is a small program that allows for up to 10 internship positions at the African American Museum in the Dallas area. Funds are administered through the University of Texas at Dallas, because they have to flow through a state agency. It is a small program. We wrestled with that, whether we kept it whole or if we cut it, what could we do with that small amount. So we recommended the elimination. Also, at the commissioner's behest, we are looking into alternative ways of continuing the intent of that program. We think that we can work with either University of Texas at Dallas or UNT Dallas to carve out some work study funds and to replace that and keep that intent going. So we think that while the strategy may be eliminated, the program can continue. The third one is number 8 on the blue list. Number 9. I'm sorry, number 9 on the blue rankings, which is the Primary Care Residence Program. That is a program that encourages doctors to enter into certain professions and practices. But the reason that we're asking for elimination of that program, or not asking, but recommending that that it be taken at that amount, is that the funding for that program has been shifted to another strategy. That is on number 24, which is item D, or strategy D13, the Family Practice Residency Program. And so while that strategy up above would be eliminated, the program still continues. It's just funding from another strategy. So those are the 3 that, if taken as recommended, would eliminate those strategies. I'd like to then maybe go through the highlighted changes, which are the changes from the previous schedule, or previous version that you had received. The first one there is ranked number 3, which is the Career Opportunity Grants. This is a new program that was funded to provide grants to students attended the private for-profit schools that are not under the Coordinating Board's jurisdiction. These are the ones that are under the jurisdiction of the Texas Workforce Commission, the IT, Hallmarks Institutes, and so forth. And when we submitted our first recommendation to you, I believe you would remember we had asked for that to be eliminated, but we got some feedback that this could be a good program, it's new, and so we're now recommending a 10% cut to that program. The second one is that's highlighted is the Armed Services Scholarship. Again, this is a new program that will kick off this fall. This is a program that provides scholarships for students that enter the ROTC programs at their respective schools and commit to serving in the armed forces after graduation. It is a program that, perhaps because of its newness, is having some difficulty getting off the ground. There are 185 slots. Every legislative member gets 1 nomination. I think the governor gets 2, lieutenant governor gets 2, and the speaker gets, I believe, 2. So it is undersubscribed. As of today, I believe we've got about 79 nominations. After having extended the deadline 3 times and almost having a staff member call almost every day reminding members that these nominations are available. I don't know if this is because it's such a new program or what, but it's we estimate that by the time that we have to cut it off sometime in August, that we may, if we're lucky, I guess, get up to 90. But at this point, we are way under that amount. And so we received some feedback, though, because we had recommended that this program be eliminated. But we received some feedback that we should give this program a chance. So the recommendation you have before you is to cut it by 10% and leave enough money in there to fund the first cohort, which is, we're estimated at 90, that are coming in next month, and to renew their scholarships for their second and third year. And so that $1.75 million will take that entering class that, from this fall through that third year of college. When we get to the exceptional items, you'll also see that we're asking for an additional amount to fund a new cohort in 12 and 13. So that's the change to that one. The next change that's highlighted is number 30 on the blue column, which is the physician education loan repayment. Originally, this was on the second page with 0 cuts. We now move it to the first page because we are recommended that $2.2 million of the set-aside money go towards our 10% cuts. This is set-aside monies that are set aside from the smokeless tobacco sales and that are dedicated for this program. It's got about $22 million in there, well, almost $23 million, and so we're tapping it to a little bit under 10% of the total strategy. The top 10% scholarship, again, that is about to enter its second year. Correct, Dan? This was first funded in FY10 or for the FY10 year. In our original recommendation to the board, it was slated for elimination. We got some feedback that we should try to save it, and so through some negotiations and some input from the commissioner and the board chair, we have redesigned that program. Well, we are redesigning the requirements or the eligibility for that program. We are cutting that by $22 million out of an appropriation of $51.5 million, and it will be still for those students that graduate in the top 10% of the class, but in addition they must also demonstrate need. As it currently is, they only had to demonstrate $1 over the cost of attendance, minus expected family contribution. So we have made it to where they must have $7,000 of estimated family contribution, which narrows the amount of people, still rewards those students that are meritorious, but also targets those students that demonstrate need. And again, this is in keeping with the commissioners and the board's priority to try to address the needs of the needy students. The other change that you see, and that's why you see the rest of the strategy B1.9 highlighted, is because our original recommendation to the board, we had shifted some monies before arriving at the base between the programs that make up B1.9. We came back and we have de-shifted, if that's a word, and we now are recommending the base for that program to be at the original allocation or appropriation for the current biennium, of course, minus the cuts that we have to take during the 5% cut. And so because of that, then we have to change the amounts that we are recommended for reductions in the first 5% and the second 5%. That pretty much cover the changes, Linda?
Can we ask any questions?
Oh, yeah, of course.
It's open for, obviously, anybody on the committee has a question. I guess just a few questions. Remind me, in the 5% cut that we made for 2010, 2011, at one point, we were trying to get the financial aid programs exempted from that. Were we successful in doing that? Yeah, in other words, how much of our 5% came out of our financial aid?
Yes and no.
I thought I'd heard some really favorable news on that, and shows I've been gone for 90 days,
And then things changed almost right after we got the good news. Arturo, why don't you explain?
Yes. The news that you received was said that they were exempting financial aid.
Okay.
And that was roughly $50 million, which is what we had, $50 million worth of cuts that we had submitted. The next day, we were asked to hold back $24 million pending the legislature coming into session in January so that they could decide on that. So while it was not, we didn't have to take the full cut, we would have to hold back $24 million financial aid.
How much were our financial aid programs cut by program for the 5% cut, to get to our 95% baseline? I mean, because I'm looking at some of these, and Carol's here, and she'll probably shoot me, but I mean, TEG's at the same level it was last session, okay? So I guess what I'm curious is how much came out of Texas grants or TELG, that's a full amount we had, if I remember right, wasn't it? 24 million. So it come out of Texas grants or BLT?
The 12-13 base, the reduction came primarily out of Beyond Time.
BLT.
GR.
So how much came out of that?
Our current appropriations was 52 million. So this is about 20 million, 20.5 million. Also,
and remind us, Dan, remind the committee why we did Beyond Time as opposed to taking out any of the other programs. Just, I don't remember part of that conversation, but let's go back and rehash that a little bit.
The current biennium or
current biennium, in terms of how we got to this baseline.
Well, what the overall principle was, why we targeted Beyond Time is
versus
taking the brunt of the cuts.
Our current biennial, however, the monies that we have set aside to accommodate this $24 million is Texas Grant, TEG, and Beyond Time, GR that's currently appropriated in the 10-11 years. So that $24 million is spread over those three programs. And top 10%, there's $2.5 million in top 10% also that were part of that exemption. There wasn't specific to our recommendation for our reduction. It wasn't program specific. It was within the strategy of $24 million that was B1.9 financial aid. It wasn't specific to a particular program or not. So the funds we're holding back, even though they're currently program specific, the guidance and for our 12-13 baseline there are no program specific cuts that have been put forward from the appropriations process. As we were crafting this baseline for 12-13, however, in order to realize those reductions, we had all of the programs that are within that financial aid strategy that could be reduced in order for us to hit our target. And as we went through each particular program, we felt like Beyond Time was the most logical program that doesn't necessarily go to support the neediest student, which kind of goes back to the commissioner's guidance that we got. Said, well, if you need to cut $20 million, Beyond Time is the logical place that you would go to make that reduction. You wouldn't want to cut Texas Grant. You wouldn't want to cut TEOG. You wouldn't want to cut TEG because those funds go to the neediest students. I hope I didn't have to answer on your question.
Maybe I've been gone too long. Remind me of the $897 million that's shown on here, $897,569. Does that reflect the 5% cut, part of the 5% cut?
Yes. but it's not, if I go look at the appropriation, I can't take 5% and run a calculation and say this is what the total is. There's a lot of other factors that go into creating what our baseline target is that are so complicated that, and I'm butchering it now, but it's much more complicated than I'm making it sound, that the LBB works with us to say, here is your baseline target for 12-13. There's a lot of other machinations that go on to create that bottom line number, which is the $1.295 billion on the second page. Out of that comes what our financial aid strategy target is. So it's not a direct 5% reduction, it's less than a 5% reduction.
But the basic rules of the game were, for the coming fiscal year, the second year of the current biennium, we kind of went to them with the total potential cuts of between 73 and 74 million. Think of it as three quarters. We shoved those three quarters across the table. They took the one that represented the $24 million in operating cost cuts, tentatively shoved the two quarters back to us, and they said, but you got to keep one of those in your pocket, essentially. So of the $48 million in student financial aid cuts, we were told we could use half of that, but keep the other half of the powder dry. So that's what happened with the actual allocations for the coming fiscal year. But in terms of the accounting for the coming biennium, we basically had to go take the entire 5% cut, start with a 95% budget, adjust it within the rules, but that's our baseline.
Yeah, but that number, though, is 1.295371.
Right.
Each particular strategy isn't necessarily 5% less than what the appropriation.
$1,295,000,000 is 95%.
Correct.
Of what was authorized
for GR.
Right.
Correct.
So the rules were somewhat different for the actual coming fiscal year 11 cuts versus how we had to treat that accounting for calculating the baseline.
Correct.
That makes sense.
I think.
In Austin, that's what passes for sense.
Okay.
Well, I think that we work very closely with the LBB to come up with what our baseline for 12-13 is, what that bottom line number is, and it's a laborious process that multiple people in our office spend countless hours working with the LBB to come up with the number. And that's reflected here as the bottom line number of, 1.295 in GR and 110 million in GR dedicated. If you want to go down into bog down into those kinds of details, we can certainly bring folks up to talk to that.
No, my point is this: is I just think when we have the full board tomorrow, as we're talking about this. I would encourage you to you're very clear, okay? It's a confusing topic, number one, but number two is I think to really make sure the board understands how we got to the 95% baseline. It's been a while, we had looked at that back, I can't remember, Commissioner, and I don't even know if the board saw that. I think they did see that first 5% baseline cost. They did. I think that went to the board. But to remind us how we got there, because it gets confusing trying to figure out as we begin to look at the financial aid piece that obviously to get 10%, we've got to go to financial aid. We don't have a choice on that. And it's just making sure we can really articulate to the board and remind them how we got to that original baseline. And I do remember now, as we got to it, that we decided to put it in one lump sum, and then, you brought that memory back to me. But I just encourage us to try to clearly articulate that, because that's going to be probably the biggest point that's going to be looked at by the board tomorrow is really financial aid as we get into the budget. So
that's a good point, Mr. Chairman. In fact, what I would simply suggest is let's start with the big picture tomorrow in front of the full board, talk about that total number, and then go to the line item explanations. That might help.
Be a little bit easier to understand. So,
Dr. Alonzo, did you explain line number 10 and 11 why we are cutting 50% and 37%? I must have missed it or something.
Line
Number 10 and 11.
I'll answer that.
The B110 and B17 items.
Essentially in the loan repayment programs, sorry, Dr. Alonzo.
No, go ahead.
The guidance that we gave our loan repayment program staff was to strip as much GR as you could possibly strip, but have the programs be to be able to maintain the programs in some kind of operational efficiency. So there is, for the border faculty loan repayment, for instance, we still maintain those loan repayment programs on each campus on the border, but we limited the number of awards that would go to each one of those campuses. So the guidelines were, if we have funds in excess of what you need to maintain a program, then we need to put those forward. Again, back to, we want to protect our neediest students, so every dollar that we save in one strategy is a dollar that we can protect in our financial aid strategies. So.
Dan, can you just walk us through top 10%, Texas Grant, TEG, and BOT in terms of the cuts that we're recommending and how we came up with why those amounts? Or somebody, I don't know, walk us through how we came up with those specific amounts.
I'll be happy to go through
just give us an overview, okay?
Top 10% scholarship, the reduction will yield a program that is funds 100% of renewal students in the biennium in 12-13. It limits the number of new students entering into the program to not Texas Grant recipients. So Texas Grant recipients would be ineligible. And it also limits the EFC on incoming students to $7,000 EFC. So it essentially...
And EFC is...
expected family contribution.
Let's make sure.
Yeah. So 7,000 expected family contribution is roughly $62,000 of median family income. The median family income is about $62,000 for you statisticians on the board.
What does that equate to in terms of student impact? You know?
Well, we had about 10,500 students that I think were awarded top 10% scholarships
this year.
By eliminating the duplication of bundling a Texas Grant with the top 10%, that's about a third of those students, 3,500 that would drop out. Then by putting in a need component, albeit a higher one than the Texas Grant, you'll catch some of those middle class kids. But I'm not sure of the remaining 7,000 students.
So about 2,500 on the current year student population that would fall outside of that. They would be about 7,000.
Would have a higher
correct
approximate income level. So you'd end up then with 4,500 students that would,
a little bit less
new students that would find funding.
Correct. But continuing to fund all of the current students as renewal students, and there are some stringent renewal requirements from a GPA standpoint, but
we're not changing the rules of the game for them.
No, sir.
Okay.
Let's see, Texas Grant, the base for Texas Grant is the 1011, is the current originally appropriated 1011 base for Texas Grant. And I guess it might be easier, Mr. Riter, if I could start with Be On Time and work backwards.
Sure.
Be On Time baseline, as we discussed, took the brunt of our reductions in GR. The reduction that's $11.2 million in the first 5% reduction, that's a combination of GR dedicated and GR. The GR reduction would leave enough general revenue to fund the ICUT Be On Time recipient renewal awards for 12 and 13. students that are already in the pipeline at the I-cuts because of the general revenue appropriation would continue to get renewal beyond time awards, but there wouldn't be sufficient funds after the reduction to make new initial awards at the I-cut institutions. I guess that's a redundancy.
Okay.
So working backwards from there, the TEG reduction is a straight 5% reduction from the original 10-11 baseline. Because we took so much out of Beyond Time, we were able to preserve Texas Grant, TEG, the other programs in their original 10-11 base level. But then when you get into the 5% reduction options, you're forced to take bigger reductions in our key financial aid programs in order for us to hit our targets. So TEG is a 5% reduction off of the original 10-11 base. Texas Grant, for lack of a better words, is how much money we needed to hit our target. So there's not really
It's the balancing.
yeah, there's not a
It's the last place we took from, but we had balance to our target.
correct. There is a little bit of work study in here where previously we did not have work study. In a lot of regards, that's kind of
A little bit of cut towards
sharing the burden. Yeah.
Okay. I'd encourage you to walk through that with the board tomorrow also. I just think those are such substantial cuts, we need to be able to articulate those to the board.
Was that adequate?
Yes.
Thank you. I'll rehearse that later.
Dr. Alonzo, I'm not understanding one thing. State of Texas is way behind in education. And here we are trying to accept cut from the governor's office. Why can't we ask for more money in place of lesser money and let other departments budget go down? Because we need to really improve education in the state of Texas. We are rated number 40 and we are cutting the budget. It will make it worse. Is there any way we can approach state to get more money, and maybe other departments where they are wasting money, maybe we can let them cut their budget? Maybe it's too late to.
Well, we're making that request. We make that request every time we talk to a member of the legislature or staff at the governor's office. We tell them that this is the worst possible time to make cuts in support for higher education. We talk about the enrollment growth, and we talk about how those students need to be supported. I think there's some interest in trying to preserve higher education funding as much as possible, but we've recommended that enrollment growth be funded, and that will require $730 million just to fund enrollment growth. So we're doing what we can, but the state's facing a very considerable deficit, so it's hard to imagine a scenario where there won't be some cuts to our budget, and in financial aid we're trying to mitigate the damage, and we're hoping that by proposing ways in which we can get better results with whatever amount of money the state invests in higher education, that will be a compelling argument to fund all or some portion of enrollment growth.
What about federal money? Can we try to get federal money to compensate for the state cut?
Well, we did. We received our funds, and some of that was filled holes in the budget for higher education. That money is going away. We make certain that members of our congressional delegation understand how reliant on federal grants like the Pell program we are in Texas. Dominic Chavez and I were in Washington the past 2 days to talk precisely about federal support for higher education in Texas.
It really makes me sad that we are cutting our budget and we want to improve education in Texas. It doesn't make sense to me at all.
Well, there are a lot of people who share that sentiment, Durga, but the LAR is a formally required document, and every agency, including ours, is basically under instructions to present a budget that has the new baseline calculated on 95% and then shows where, if we have to, where we would take successive additional 5% cuts. So basically our staff has really sort of struggled mightily to figure out the least of all evils if presenting this and how we have to go about this should it come to pass in the coming legislative session. So we're following the rules, but we're all reluctant to see it enacted as presented on the worst case scenario. And that's why we were pointing out, as the commissioner said, how much growth we've had. We don't want Texas to be a victim of its own success in increasing the enrollment by almost 122,000 students, 104,000 in public institutions. Now is when we need the funding to keep those students in school and see them to graduation. So your point is well taken.
This is actually a great segue to the second page of your spreadsheet, where we list all of the strategies that we're recommending zero reductions to. I'd like to just highlight some of those programs very quickly. The Teach for Texas Loan Repayment Program, you see there, B16. This is the program that is for certified teachers who agree to teach in critical shortage areas of the state or in critical shortage fields. So this is right in alignment with our accelerated plan for closing the gaps, where we're trying to get more well-prepared certified teachers in Texas. It's a huge demand on this program, so we'd like to see zero cuts to that program. The other one is the Engineering Recruitment Scholarship, and this is to encourage students to go into the engineering fields. So again, this is another one of those programs that align very nicely with what we're trying to do with the accelerated plan for closing the gaps. The next one is the Higher Education Performance Incentive Funding Program. This strategy actually funds two initiatives. One is the performance incentive funding, which goes to the general academics for graduates. They get a bonus for graduating at-risk students or for students graduating in STEM fields. This is the $80 million that was funded for this current biennium through federal stimulus funds, the ARA funds. So that's not reflected in this line right here, but you'll see when we get to our exceptional items that we are asking for $80 million in general revenue to replace the stimulus funds. What you do see here in B112 for the Higher Education Performance Incentive Strategy is the TRIP money. This is the Texas Research Incentive Program. It's a matching program for our emerging research universities, and we felt this was passed by House Bill 51 last session. We thought we needed to protect these dollars. And you'll see, kind of moving down to the two-year enrollment growth and the general academic enrollment growth. The commissioner just talked about how in the fall of 2009 we experienced the greatest history of the state in higher education, and we really need to fund institutions for supporting that growth. So this is for dramatic enrollment growth for these institutions that reach certain thresholds. We felt that we needed to protect these strategies from the cuts. It's in alignment with the board's formula funding recommendations, where you're recommending that the legislature fund 100% of growth.
Linda?
Yes.
On the B112 strategy description, just for clarity's sake, can we put HE performance incentives / TRIP funds?
We certainly can for your purposes, but the way that it is in our bill pattern in the appropriations bill, that's the title of the strategy, and I'm not sure if we're trying to clean that up. No.
I'm actually more concerned about legislative offices and policymakers
Right.
interpreting it correctly.
We can make the change on the spreadsheet and what we put out online.
Yeah, I would, in these, since this will probably be used in most presentations with policymakers, et cetera, I'd like to put that on there. So
We certainly will.
And what was that breakout again between those two? I'm sorry, you said...
The TRIP, that's the $47.5 million for
So
TRIP.
we funded all of the performance incentive up underneath ARA.
Under ARA, correct.
Are there, if I remember right, what else out of our, we know we had some formula funding that came up under ARA. I can't remember how much. What was the total amount that came out of our budget that was funded by ARA?
80 million.
80 total.
It was for the incentive funding. That was all that was trusteed to the coordinating board. The institutions received special item appropriations through
And formula funding.
Formula funding.
formula
Our
funding.
policy. How much our formula? Well, that's another day, another topic. But
And it doesn't come through us either.
I know, but just
We can get that amount for you.
we just need. I know y'all are keeping that in front of the policymakers.
So we know, I remember it's $15 million for the community colleges. I shouldn't
Yeah,
know.
that's. I mean, that's another topic that I know you're doing. Okay, thank you.
It was about 100. The total was 146, 147 million for all the funding, all three categories.
Other questions?
Exceptional items?
You want us to quickly go over the exceptional items?
Yes.
Okay, the first four items are the increased funding for financial aid. As you know, this is the board's top priority, commissioner's top priority, and so we're asking for increased funding for those mainstay programs there.
And that gets straight to your point, there we go, that funding recommendation.
Number four is funding for the top 10% scholarships. And this is what we talked about, that it would continue the top 10% scholarships to a narrow band of students that meet that top 10% graduation, but also have that need that we talked about in the new biennium. Number five is, we just talked about that. That's for restoration of the $80 million that we lost because it was a one-time funding through the Article 12 ARA funds. Six, Linda just talked about that. That is a program that the Teach for Texas Loan Repayment Program that is got a huge demand, and that's one of the board's top priority for teachers. And we're simply asking for more money to try to meet more of that demand. The Physician Education Loan Repayment Program. Again, this is a program that we're simply asking for additional funds. Number 8 is to continue the college readiness grant strategies that we have to take. This is a restoration amount to keep that momentum going on the college readiness. Number 9 is a replacement of funds that right now flow to us from TEA. This is for the funding of the math, science
teacher
academies that the legislation used to be with TA, or the authorization used to be with TA. At the last session, that authority came to us, but the money did not follow, and so we have to right now enter into an MOU with TA to get that money. And so we have learned that TA does not intend to ask for that money in the new biennium, and so we're asking for it to be funded directly to us. The Armed Services Scholarship is what I talked about earlier, which is in the first year, fund 185 slots, and then in the second year to renew those slots renew those students from 12 and a new cohort from FY13 for that program. Number 11 is the request that we have to tap into a national clearinghouse for data. Right now, we don't have the ability, David, correct me if I'm saying this wrong, this is your area, but we don't have the ability to track students that go out of state, and so this would allow us to tap into that database. This is a initial fee. We figure that if we can get into that, then the renewal or the continuing cost would be around $50,000 a year.
About $80,000 a year.
About $80,000 a year. The number 12 is a request for FTEs, no money associated with that. As Georgia, this also goes to your question. As we seek additional federal funds, we are hampered. We can get the funds, and we are getting the funds. I spoke about the $12 million CAC that's coming to us, but we are still restricted by the FTE cap. So we are seeking FTEs to be able to administer those federal funds. And then number 13 is a request for Baylor College of Medicine. As we cut them during the 10% reduction, we're asking for restoration plus an amount to bring them up to their statutorily authorized amount that they can get through their special formula. Baylor College of Medicine cannot ask for the funds themselves. This is the only mechanism that they have, and so we're the vehicle. We put it in here, and then they are the ones that seek the funds through the legislative process. So those are the exceptional items. Be glad to answer any questions on any one of them.
Arturo, back on Baylor College, when we made got to our baseline, did 5% come off them?
Yes.
And is that consistent with what was done in the state-funded health science center?
Yes. And so the cuts to them are to keep them consistent with what happens to the HRI, the health-related institutes. Right.
A question, and David, you may be best able to answer this. Back on exceptional item number 11, you said that after getting in the first year, the ongoing cost would be $80,000 a year.
Correct.
So can we ask for less in fiscal year 13 for that strategy?
Well, you're talking about in the exceptional items?
Yes. Yep. We've got $250 in the first year because there's some upfront costs.
But what we have to do in the initial years is track multiple years of data. So in subsequent years, we just need to add in 1 year annually. So that this is to get enough data to track students over a number of years to get a full picture of the graduates. We could do less, but we would have less coverage. We wouldn't have the full understanding of the graduation rates or the success of the full picture of success of students. But I think how many years of data is Susan? 5, or is it? Yes, 5 years of data.
So you're saying to get 5 years of data, we need $500,000? Okay.
Yes.
But then wouldn't it really need to be front-end loaded or not?
It will take a little bit of...
I can hear you from there.
Yeah.
Okay. It'll take a little bit of time to get the data to them and get it back. The process to actually get each year of data and divide it into 5 groups and so we've got to spread out over both years.
Yeah. Okay. And the process is more difficult because the National Student Clearinghouse no longer uses Social Security numbers, so the matching process is much more intense than it was a few years ago. Because they only have, as I understand it, name and address, date of birth. So you have to be exercise a little bit more sleuthing to do the match, which takes longer.
Yeah. Well,
so part of it's limited by our staff levels and able to do the matching.
So bottom line is that this is the funding, and we think we can accomplish our goal with dividing it even.
And we have had specific legislative inquiries about when we're going to have access to this data. So this wasn't strictly coming from a staff need, but also a legislative desire to have a better understanding. And the board has expressed this from time to time.
Yeah, there's no question that a chunk of our students go out of state, and so we don't have the complete picture without this data.
That's right. We just have estimates. We think it's about 10 to 12%, but we can't really know until we
know anecdotally at some high schools it's 40 to 50%. So.
Well, Highland Park, for example, Westlake would probably be in that range.
Okay.
Other questions regarding the budget, the LAR event?
Mr. Chairman, just a comment. Durga, to your point, it's painful to lose any dollars out of higher any education, especially where we're at today. But I think what our staff has done is really extraordinary work in terms of getting out there and getting feedback from our legislators and their staffs to make sure that we are trying to approach the cuts consistent with closing the gaps and what we're trying to do to take our state to this next level, but also consistent with what they feel their constituencies are requiring of us. And it's been a delicate balance that the staff has undertaken in making sure that we go out there. They've met with them, they've listened to them, and made adjustments accordingly, and probably are establishing, yet again, another best practice for other agencies. So, Linda, to all of you all doing all that, Arturo, it's been incredible work, and it's not only are the numbers astounding, but just the input and the priorities from all different parts of this huge state come into play, and great work.
Thank you. Great. If there are no other comments or questions, I would entertain a motion adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the Agency Operations Committee regarding the Coordinating Board's appropriation request for 2012-2013. Could I have that motion? Durga, motion. Joe, second. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed by the same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. The next agenda item was agenda item 5D, and we're going to postpone that agenda item. I think that we ran right up against the public comments time, and we won't need a little bit more time to evaluate some of those comments that came in. Could I have a motion to postpone item 5D?
So moved.
Joe. Durga, second. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed by the same sign. The next item is agenda item 6, should be 6G, which are requests for purchases of materials and services in excess of $100,000 and less than $750. First request is consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee regarding a request for the Helms student loan software for fiscal year 2011 with a total not to exceed $725,000. Dr. Alonzo will present this agenda item.
And actually, it's 5E with
Yeah, that's right, 5A. Sorry about that.
This first request is for approval to continue the usage fee, the annual usage fee for our Helms system. If you recall, this is the student loan system that we implemented in 2007. In 2006, we entered into a contract, and so the usage fee is based every year on the estimated number of records in the system, and this represents what we estimate we will need for FY11. So we estimate that we will need not to exceed $725,000, and we request approval of this usage fee.
Any questions? If not, could I have a motion for extension of the contract with Helms? Joe, motion. Second by Durga. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed by the same sign. Second request is consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to approve fiscal year 2011 purchase in the amount of estimated $120,000 for the network services through an interagency contract with the Department of DIR. Arturo?
Yes, this is an item that's related to our participation in the Consolidated Data Center project. This is for additional network services. We are going through an interagency contract that we have with the Department of Information Resources. They have bid the services out, and so we are simply acquiring those through DIR. It's needed, and this is to be able to connect to the, for example, the San Angelo Center through the network, and so we respectfully request approval of for an amount not to exceed $120,000 for FY11.
Before I ask for a motion, could I ask quick? Was there at some point that, and maybe it's something where we were encountering some difficulties in the data? I mean, have those been resolved?
No, in fact, there has been some recent press on the relationship between the state and IBM. The problems have not been resolved. We continue to deal with them, we continue to work through them, but I could not honestly say that they have been resolved. The state issued, through DIR, who administers the contract, issued a notice to cure to IBM about a week ago, 2 weeks ago, and gave them 30 days. And so we don't know where that's going. But unfortunately, the answer is no.
And really, this is, I know we have to approve this, but this is our alternative, the only alternative.
That's right, at this time. Yeah.
Joe, do you have a question?
I'm just going to move. We don't have much choice.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was, but that's what I was trying to get. So, in light of all that, could I have a motion for approval? Joe, motion. Durga, second. I hate to ask y'all, but we're short one committee member, so y'all are the two guys. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed by the same sign. Thank you. Next item is a request to amend the current purchase order of the document execution service fees for the judgment portfolio for fiscal year 2011.
Dan's here to answer any specific questions, but this is part of the presentation that he made earlier, that we transfer the collection services, collection of delinquent loans to the OAG, and one of the benefits has been that they, as Dan noticed, change the way that they serve those notices. They've come back to us, and the current vendor that we have, they would like to change it. It does not change the amount. Is that right, Dan? Just a vendor. And so since we want to have full disclosure, we would like to request permission from the AOC to authorize the OAG to change vendors for collection or for servicing of delinquent notices.
Or to provide the coordinating board more flexibility with who we contract with. Right now we have the authority we have is with a specific vendor. This is for a service of personal service, so it allows us to contract with more than one vendor to carry out these personal services.
Good. Any questions?
Yes, are we going to get competitive bidding on this so that we can try to lower our cost? Since we have a budget cut, we can go to our vendors and get a lower price from the vendors.
Our previous contract was competitively bid. The OAG actually they competitively bid a contract every year, and they have a provision within their purchasing authority that allows other state agencies to piggyback on top of their negotiated rate that they get for their services. So we're essentially going to have the ability to piggyback onto the OAG's competitive bid, and actually the prices have come down from our current agreement that we have with our current servicer, that they're going to come down from $99 to about $73 per service, per successful service. So there is a cost reduction. This agenda item really is to give the coordinating board of the OAG much greater flexibility on who we contract with within the guidelines of not going over $750,000, which was approved in April the last April board meeting.
Any other questions? Got a motion to approve the amendment to the current purchase order. Joe?
So moved.
Durga, second. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed by the same sign. Then agenda item 4 is consideration of adopting the commissioner's recommendation to the committee to approve the renewal membership with Southern Regional Educational Board for fiscal year 2011. Any other comments you want to make on that?
Yes, and we failed to make this when we were going over the LAR. As we were going through the potential reductions, when we were looking at the H strategy, which is the the strategy that funds the administrative operations of the agency, the timing couldn't have been worse or better, I guess. We got the bill, and we discussed that this is one of those that we have been tasked with paying on behalf of the state. Actually, the membership is for the state. The governor appoints members and representatives to the SREB. We have several representatives there too. But two factors. Number one, most of the work that SREB does is in the area of public education. We felt that we get very little out of this, or not. It's almost $200,000. Certainly not that amount of money of services from them. A few publications every once in a while, but so this is recommended for cutting in the 10% reductions. We talked to all the legislative staffers about this. We made sure that we pointed this out, especially those whose members serve on the board. Nobody really had a problem with it. They understood. They know times are tough. They also know that perhaps TA should pick this up, because whether they will or not, I don't know, but that's for them to request that. So after this year, then we recommended that we eliminate that membership. But for this year, for this coming year, it's already in the budget, and so we recommend approval of one one additional year of membership in SREB.
Can I ask why would we do that and not use the $200,000 for financial aid?
Guys, you read my mind.
I don't get it. Unless there's,
Well, there would be some political ramifications right away. The governor's office would get a call from.
So you want a year to blend it in?
Yes.
The governor's office would get a call from who?
From Dave Spence, the head of SREB.
And so maybe the funds would come from where they ought to come from.
That's a remote possibility. I think the much more likely scenario is find the money and pay for it.
And our briefing to the staffers has been that we are recommended getting out of it in 12.
Right. But it does beg the question, why not cut it off at a year earlier? But I understand the political ramifications.
I will defer to the commissioner's judgment and advice. So, in that light, could I have a motion to approve the renewal membership for 2011 with SREB?
So moved.
Second. Derek, all those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed by the same sign.
Let the record reflect the noted lack of enthusiasm.
Agenda item 6A is discussion of updates on external audits. This item requires no action. Mr. Tigby is going to provide support. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. The item 6A, it's an update on two external audits that we had sent to you earlier on around March or April. And the first one is concerning the audit of the ARA project by the OIG, as Mr. Dan Griffiths had referred to in his earlier presentation. That audit was done at the beginning of the ARA project. So practically we were new to the ARA project. So the recommendation was that we do have some things that we need to put in place in order to improve the controls over the ARA project. And as you've known, Dan Griffith and his group have put in some controls, and the audit that we are in the process of finishing is telling us that things are much better than they were about a year ago. And the second external audit was the statewide single audit report for the year ended August 31st, 2009. We were happy to the audit report gave the state of Texas a clean opinion, and we were especially happy that out of the state agencies, 9 state agencies and 17 higher institutions of education whose state schedule of expenditure of federal awards were audited. The auditors did come across some errors, and our agency was not included among those with the errors. So that is the update on external audit item.
Any questions for Mr. Tigby on the external audits? I think we'd covered the aura when Dan had been up there earlier. And we're not, a couple of things. One is we're not taking action. Secondly, we can't take any action because we lost a quorum when Durga walked out. So I assume, Bill, we can continue along so long as we're not taking official action.
That is correct, sir.
Okay. No other questions for Mr. Tigby. We'll move on to discussion of the internal audit reports, and there's no action required here, so we can move on with your reports. Okay.
Our item 6B1 is the audit of the enrollment and financial aid audit at Prairie View A&M University, and our conclusion was that the institution comply with all the applicable rules and regulations concerning the enrollment reporting. They did comply with the student eligibility criteria for the Be On Time loan program. However, we did come across some instances of non-compliance in the student eligibility criteria for the Texas grant, and I'm happy to say that the institution has been proactive in implementing all our recommendations. And they did send us a check for 10,000 plus, and they are putting some controls to improve the operations in their financial aid office.
Any questions on the purview on financial audit? Okay, we'll move on to the Tarrant County College District.
Yes, sir. The item 6B2, the enrollment and financial aid audit at the Tarrant County College District. We concluded that the institution comply with all the relevant coordinating board rules and regulations for reporting enrollment contact hours and a student for formula funding for fiscal year 2008, and they also comply with the rules and regulations for financial aid during the fiscal year 2008.
Any questions? Not many findings in the Tarrant County. Any questions? Okay, let's move on to the College of the Mainland.
At item 6B3, College of Mainland, audit of enrollment and financial aid. We concluded that the institution comply with the coordinating board applicable rules and regulations for reporting enrollment contact hours and a student for formula funding for fiscal year 2008. They also comply with the applicable rules for awarding a financial aid during the same period. And we concluded that internal controls are sufficient to ensure that financial aid and enrollment data are accurately collected and reported. We did make a recommendation that institution need to formalize their security standard policy for protecting information assets in accordance with TAC 202. The institution had formally adopted a policy in accordance with our recommendations.
Any questions on the College of the Mainland audit? Okay. Move on to the Data Security Education Research Center at A&M.
is item 6B4, data security are detected here in ERC. We concluded that the ERC has instituted some controls to provide a reasonable assurance that confidential student data is properly secured and protected for unauthorized access and the disclosures. We did come across with some opportunity for improvement that we are shared with them, and the center took some corrective actions to address those issues before the issuance of our report.
And you're satisfied with those corrective actions?
Yes, sir. Yeah, it was, sir.
Any questions regarding Texas A&M, the ERC? Okay, let's move on to the internal. I guess what will we do? What's next?
It's an internal audit work plan.
The internal audit work plan. Yes.
This is item 5B5 is to provide an update on our internal audit plan as at this was at the end of May. So some of the comments here, if you look at when you read at the end of May, we're already in July. Things have changed, and we also have a schedule at the back of this write-up that shows the original budget hours for the projects and the actual hours. We show the variances as you've requested in the past, and where we also provided you with explanations as to those variances.
Questions?
There is a lot of variability in the variances. I'm curious if, Tony, if you've see a pattern as to why there's some volatility in the estimate versus the actual hours on these.
There are a lot of reasons for that, and one of the reasons for the variances is because when we started some of the projects, we did not choose adequate sample for us to be able to extrapolate our results. So I know that in one instance we had to do a redo in order for us to be able to have a good sample that will reflect the characteristics of the population, and in a couple of instances we did come across some situations wherein we had to extend our scope of work. So that those are the reasons.
I'd just like to piggyback on that a little bit. Chairman Hellenfels, in the sense that one of our other items is to look at next year's audit work plan, and I can absolutely understand that if we get in somewhere we find we've got to have greater scope, that obviously it's going to take greater hours. But I just want us to really, as we get into that agenda item for our audit work plan for next year, Mr. Tigby, is to really understand, do we really think with reliability we've got those numbers close? Because the variances are significant, and my concern is that then we don't cover all there is that we should be covering within the scope of what we need to be covering. That's my biggest concern, is we under budget and we can't cover the scope of what we need to be covering from an audit standpoint. So maybe it's a one-off that we'll discuss as we get into the next year's plan, but that's probably my biggest concern in looking at this, and that we then fall short of what we should have covered in our entire scope of the agency. So I guess that's a statement more than it's a question. So we'll talk about that when we get to the work plan. Any other questions or comments on the internal work plan for fiscal year 2010? Okay, loan collection process, which was agenda item Roman numeral 6B6.
Our conclusion on the audit of the loan collection process was that the coordinating board has established adequate internal controls to provide reasonable assurance that the cash receipts are properly received, recorded, accounted for, and safeguarded against loss. And during the fiscal year 2009, coordinating board processed 530,724 loan payments totaling 82,085,345.24 from borrowers.
And they responded to the opportunities for improvement?
Yet we did come across two opportunities, and the management has taken action to address them.
Okay, and you're satisfied with those?
Yes, sir.
Responses? Okay. Okay. Human resources, agenda item 6B7.
Our conclusion is that the management has instituted some controls to comply with applicable federal and state laws and regulations, as well as the coordinating board policies and procedures. We did come across some opportunities for improvements, which we have shared with the management, and they have been proactive in taking some actions in order to address them, and we are satisfied with the actions.
Commissioner, would you or Arturo just comment on this? Because I'll be honest, when I read this, I was a little bit concerned when I read this, just because I think it's so important that we're giving timely reviews to our people, and I guess just to make sure the two of y'all feel like we've now, from a human resource standpoint, are on top of this. I just think it's important for numerous reasons. Number one is for our people themselves, is that we're giving them feedback on their performance. So, Arturo, can you comment on that?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, we've worked, as Tony noted, we've worked very, very closely with his auditors as they identify these areas for improvement. We concur. I mean, that there is work to be done there. We realize the severity of, or the risk of not being in full compliance with evaluations and timely feedback to employees. We will implement some very aggressive steps, or take some very aggressive steps to speed that up, and to ensure that in the follow-up those items are all corrected. I be glad to respond to any particular one, but I can tell you that we will be looking at this very closely. And you have my assurance that in the follow-up audit, we will have those items remediated.
Questions, comments?
Does that extend not only the review, but also the policy for the salary adjustment criteria?
Yes.
And just wasn't related to those observations, but I see where we need to seek statutory authority to obtain criminal background checks for non-IT jobs.
That's correct.
I was surprised to learn that.
I was very surprised and in fact somewhat dismayed to find out that we check records on only, or we're authorized to check records on only those people that come to IT. I even suggested to the general counsel that everybody's in IT because they get a computer, but he wouldn't go for that.
That seems reasonable to me.
In light of that, we will be seeking authorization because I think it is an area that needs to.
Is that something that needs to happen in the legislative session?
We've already, excuse me, we've already drafted some proposed legislation that we intend to submit at the upcoming session so that our powers are expanded in that area.
Is it unique to our agency, or?
No, there are a number of agencies that do have expanded powers. There's a number of agencies that don't. And everybody is allowed by statute to do the IT background check. And so it's simply a matter of requesting and being granted the additional powers.
It's an agency by agency.
It is. There's numerous statutes that address individual agencies or even individual agency. And I would anticipate that's what we would end up with.
I would think policymakers would want to just do a housekeeping cleanup bill to sweep up all agencies. If we can help facilitate that, obviously we've got to be concerned about our own agency, but it's just ridiculous. I can't believe we don't have the authority to set our own policy. Does this affect institutions of higher learning?
No, that's part of the dismay that I expressed, Fred. I come from, as you know, from the A&M system where we did have, and they do, I guess, have the authority to classify or to make everybody what they call a security risk employee.
Although they didn't until recently.
Yeah, well, we in my agency we did, and so we checked the background.
Yeah, I mean, the irony was apparently faculty and extension agencies were doing it, but they weren't doing it on administrative persons.
Yeah, right.
But in hindsight, apparently they had the authority to change that policy.
That's correct.
We don't. So that's goofy.
But they have it by statute.
Yeah, well, glad to hear we've got the legislation drafted. I hope somebody will think of the idea to do it statewide and just, end the hodgepodge.
That would be, I would think that would be the ideal as well. But our main goal right now is just to fit us into a statute.
I know.
Thank you, Bill. Okay, any other questions or comments on the audit on human resources management? I look forward to the follow-up.
Yes, sir. I don't have a question on the resource management and all that, but something rang a bell as we were going through an earlier discussion here. And this kind of is a throwback to my past. Whenever we would go in to audit a company or a big corporation, we never could figure out how many hours it was going to take because you never knew what you were going to uncover once you got in there. And that's a real challenge. I guess it's an art more than a science as to how you go about figuring all that out in advance. And it just occurred to me, and I guess I ought to be asking Tony how this works, is when we go in, whatever it is we're auditing, my background says that we go in there about half blind because we've got our best guess up as to what hours we're going to spend. But once you start to turn the leaves back, a lot of things come out of the woodwork. And you can't just drop it and walk off and leave them. You've got to deal with it. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure exactly how we manage that or handle that in-house here. I didn't understand it when I was around here a whole lot, but now that I'm having to do it in other places, it's an issue, and there's no answer you can give me that would satisfy me because not that you don't know, but I just don't understand how you calculate it, frankly.
Well, I think
good point.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. My question was, I think if we get in and we really uncover issues that are going to take more time, to me that's expanded scope.
Yeah, it is.
And that's why I was saying for those where we see variants where there's expansion of scope, I think that's absolutely understandable, that we get in there and we see if there's issues that we've got to dig deeper, we've got to deepen our sample or something else. It's really just making sure, I think my biggest concern, Joe, and where my comment was headed was as we look at our audit plan, which is our next, I think, a couple agenda items, the key is for our board to make sure that we're looking at the resources that we've got in our audit function and understanding what we should be covering within the scope of our audit function and making sure we have the necessary resources. That's where my comments come in. And so all you can do is your best guess. But if you get in, you turn over a bunch of skeletons, and obviously that's going to take more hours. So
I agree. I think all we can do, best idea I've got would be just based on experience and the X number of audits, just assume you're going to uncover some percentage.
The swag.
And use that and use a swag as a contingency for percentage of hours over the entire group of audits. That's about the only idea that I would suggest. I just was asking, personally I was asking about patterns because I saw, like on Prairie View where we uncovered some issues, it made some sense to me that we had budgeted 400 hours but it went 569. Well, we uncovered some stuff and scope expanded. On the other hand, I think College of the Mainland, if I remember, that was one of the ones where we didn't uncover anything, and yet it also was like at 593 a sort of a similar overrun in time. So all I would say is maybe we can come up with a swag methodology for building in a contingency, because you are certainly going to run into things you don't expect or can't predict. But secondly, if there's other work process patterns that we see a couple of underlying reasons why this happens sometimes, maybe we can kind of do a root analysis, a root cause analysis, and say there's a process improvement whereby we can control that a little better. And I don't know the answer without looking for those patterns.
Well noted. So, I'm lost. Agenda item 7B8, isn't that right?
Yes, sir.
Discussion of internal audit report on outstanding audit recommendations.
Our conclusion on the outstanding recommendations on the follow-up audit of Be On Time and the Miami Controls assessment by Deloitte and Touche was that management has implemented all the recommendations by the Deloitte and Touche, and also they've implemented 2 of the recommendations out of 4 for the Be On Time, and we are satisfied with their actions.
Any questions for Tony on the internal audit report on the outstanding audit recommendations?
Will the 2 that are in progress on the Be On Time, will those be completed by the end of this month?
No, they will not be completed by the end of this year, because they do take some time. They have to put in some process to implement them. That's why.
Any other questions? No action take on that. The agenda item Roman numeral 6C is consideration of approval of the risk assessment and audit work plan for fiscal year 2011. We do have to take action on this, so nobody get up and go to the restroom so we don't lose an audit. Mr. TB.
Okay, sir. We are presenting our annual internal audit work plan and risk assessment for FY 2011, and the work plan is contained on the page 2. We're asking for a total hours of 6,176 hours. The allocation of the resources is detailed on page 3. As you see on the work plan on page 2, we're asking we're budgeting 3,460 hours, which is 56% of auditory resources. We plan on carrying over 1,000 hours to be able to complete some projects that we could not complete. And for new projects under the institutional audits, we are budgeting 2,460 hours. I know you've expressed concern about the variances on the hours. What we plan on doing this year is to change our sampling methodology. As a matter of fact, we had a meeting this morning with Susan Warren of KPMG that we would like to follow the sampling methodology of the American Institute of Certified Public Accountant, and then we will use their methodology of doing a control testing. It has a minimum number of samples that you will go in and test for the first time. So we will change our methodology from saying that we will go in first time when we go and audit an institution, assuming that we will extrapolate. But from our experience, we do not. I don't think our agency want to extrapolate first time when we go and do an audit. So since we do not extrapolate and ask for any refund back for the first time, we are thinking that we would just do the first time on the audit and do the test of controls. If our test of controls show some exceptions, then we will identify those exceptions and share them with the schools and tell them that if we come back and do a follow-up, that is when we will go in with the intention of, if we come across similar audit exceptions, then we will have to extrapolate. So we will experiment with that, and so that at least we will be able to control our hours.
There's a balance here. It kind of gets back, Joe, to something you said. I want to make sure. I know you're hearing us ask a lot of questions about hours, okay? And that's important. But the other thing I want to make sure of, Tony, is that I want to understand the difference of how we were doing it versus how we're going to do it. And are we, by doing that, are we just saving hours but giving up quality on the scope of how we've audited the institutions before? I'm a little bit, and yet I think I heard you say the KPMG has signed off on this methodology, this new methodology.
Yes.
But can you just, I'm trying to understand the difference between the two methodologies, and are we giving up something on one to gain greater ability of hours, is what I'm saying. Is that, I think that gets to your point too, Joe.
Okay. How we are doing now is when we pull our sample, we will pull the sample with the intention that we may be able to extrapolate, and in order to be able to extrapolate according to our statistician, we cannot pull any sample less than 100. So, but So when we do that and test 100, in fact, one of the audit that we did, we had to test 128. But when we do that, it takes a long time. And from our experience, we will just, when we come across any exceptions, we will just let institutions know that if we had extrapolated your errors to the rest of the population, this is the amount of money that we will normally have asked you. But since we do not ask them for refund based on extrapolated amount, I'm thinking that it is a waste of our time. So we will just do a test of controls that they do have in place that will not entail that we pull a sample of over 100. We will still be able to test if they do have those controls in place. But it's only that we will not test a large sample. So that is how the two methodology work.
Fred, before you leave, I'm trying to read your writing here. Can you read this for me?
Well, there were two issues I noticed on the plan. There are 4 carryover institutional audits that you're budgeting. You're recommending 1,000 hours, and yet the budget for those was 1,450 hours in the current year when they weren't done. So I'm curious how we can get those 4 done with that many fewer hours. The second thing I noticed is we'd budgeted 400 hours for ARA audits, but only expended 151.5, but we're recommending 300 next year. And so I just wondered whether we could get by with less than 300 for ARA audits because of what was expended this year. There may be reasons why we can't. And if some of those hours ought not to be shifted up to those 4 carryover institutional audits.
For the four carryover institutions, we've already started work on them. We may be able to complete 1 or 2 of them before the end of the year, which is
the end of the fiscal year.
Yes, which is August, and then the remaining hours we will have to carry over to the beginning of the year. And on the ARA, we put 300 hours there just as a stopgap. This is the hour that I and Dan Griffiths agreed upon, that just in case there are some high-risk institutions, that high-risk sub-recipients, that it will need us to go and audit.
Okay.
So in case by the middle of the year, if we did not use those hours, my plan is to roll them over to institutional audit.
Tony, the 4 carryovers that I was assuming, and I could be wrong on this, there were those that are in fiscal year 10 listed as under item 3 as the first 4, 1 community college, 1 ICUT, 1 public university, and 1 health related.
Yes, sir.
And those, so it shows 0 hours, but I realize, of course, as I look at the date now, this status report was back as of May 31st.
Yes, sir.
So you're saying that some hours have now been expended since then, during June and July?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
We would expend some hours.
All right. Any of those 4 in particular that have been primarily worked on and maybe finished before the end of the year?
It is positive that we will finish 1. I'm not sure about the second one.
Which one do you think we'll finish of those four?
We should be able to finish one of the high courts.
One of the I cuts? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Well, that was estimated at 250, so that would drop down to 1,200, and of those other three, then we're investing some hours in one of those other three.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, that answers my question.
Any other questions? Joe, you're as close to this as anybody else. Any questions or comments?
Yeah, I've got a question, but it probably ought not to be discussed necessarily here, but it only, how many, well, let me digress. How many schools do we audit in 1 year?
We audit an average of six to seven. Yeah.
And how do we determine which 6 they are?
We go through a process of risk assessment, and we do have the risk assessment for this year on appendix number 2 in your package. We rank them according to some risk factors.
There's a reason why I'm asking that. It has nothing to do with what Tony's doing right now at all. I occasionally get letters from people giving me a heads up about something going on someplace that's not exactly wholesome. And I'm not real sure exactly how I should deal with that. And somewhere along the way, I'd like for us to sit down and have a discussion about that, because some of the schools, oh, and also, it's like certain departments. I've got a letter on my desk at home right now about a particular department within a particular university that there's problems in. And I'm not sure exactly how to address this thing. Whether this is something we come back here and discuss with Tony, maybe work a deal out where you go to that university and examine to determine whether the information I'm getting is right or wrong. I don't know whether it is or not. It's just out of the clear blue, anonymous, but a past life, you get a lot of anonymous letters that have a lot of truth in them. And I'm not sure how we deal with that. And this is probably not the place to discuss it.
Well, what I would suggest, Joe, of course, Wallace is going to be the incoming chair of agency ops, and I think if those situations come in, I think you need to raise those to the attention of Wallace and the chair and Fred, in my opinion, and then let them, y'all have that conversation, and then bring Tony into it and make assessments as to whether we need to do additional due diligence or not. But I would encourage you to bring that to those two people's attention, so then they can determine what appropriate action we should do.
It will happen sooner than you think.
Okay.
Yeah. Good. To answer my question.
Other questions? Comments on the work plan? If not, could I have a motion to approve the risk assessment and audit work plan for fiscal year 2011?
So moved.
Joe. Durga, second. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed by the same sign. This concludes the Committee on Agency Operations meeting, and unless there's any other business to be brought to the committee. If not, could I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Mr. Hinton, Durga, second. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed by the same sign. Thank y'all. We'll see you tomorrow.